Beyond crisis, the daily practice of Black mental health. When was the last time you thought about your mental health? Was it during a moment of crisis when everything felt like it was falling apart? Or is it something you tend to daily, like watering a plant or charging your phone? I recently had the privilege of interviewing Monique Lundin, a visionary advocate whose work has fundamentally transformed how we approach mental wellness in Black communities. She's not just a thought leader, she's a revolution in human form. Through her groundbreaking research and compassionate approach, she's created pathways to healing that many never knew existed, illuminating corners of our collective consciousness that have remained in shadow for far too long. What struck me most about our conversation wasn't just her extraordinary expertise, but how she's completely reframing mental health from emergency response to daily practice. Mental health isn't something you address only when you're in crisis, Monique emphasized during our talk, her voice carrying the weight of both personal experience and professional insight. It's something you practice every single day. That statement hit me like a revelation, like someone had finally put words to a truth I'd always known but couldn't articulate. For too many of us, especially in Black communities, mental health only becomes visible when it's already a five-alarm fire. We wait until we're completely burned out, until anxiety has us paralyzed, until depression has hollowed us from the inside out. But what if we approached our mental well being the way we approach physical fitness? Nobody expects to run a marathon without training. Nobody expects to lift 300 pounds on their first day at the gym. Yet somehow we expect our minds to handle marathon level stress without any conditioning. It's like expecting your smartphone to function perfectly without ever charging it. Eventually, it will shut down, not because it's defective, but because that's how batteries work. The data tells a sobering story. According to research from NYU Silver School of Social Work, young adults of color are 60% more likely than their white peers to report psychotic symptoms, those exposed to police violence. Their odds jump by 52%. These aren't just statistics floating in academic journals. They're evidence of wounds inflicted by systems that were never designed for our well being. When I shared these findings with a colleague, she paused, then said, "So you're telling me that living while Black is literally making us sick?" Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And the truly tragic part, we've normalized this reality to the point where many don't even recognize it as abnormal. But here's where Monique's wisdom becomes revolutionary. Recognizing these systemic stressors doesn't mean accepting them as inevitable. It means we need different tools, different approaches, and yes, daily practices that acknowledge this reality while refusing to surrender to it. Think about it. We're constantly told to practice self care. But what does that actually mean when you're navigating workplaces where you're the only Black person in the room? What does that mean when every news cycle brings another trauma that looks like you or someone you love? What does that mean when the very concept of care has been twisted to suggest that structural problems require only individual solutions? Self care isn't just bubble baths and scented candles, though, if those work for you, by all means, fill that tub. For Black professionals and entrepreneurs, it's establishing boundaries that honor your humanity in spaces that sometimes forget you have one. It's creating rituals that reconnect you to joy when the world seems determined to disconnect you from it. It's building communities that remind you that you're not crazy for feeling what you feel. You're responding normally to abnormal circumstances. During our interview, Monique shared something that stopped me in my tracks. The most radical act of resistance is sometimes just taking care of yourself in a world that doesn't expect you to survive, let alone thrive. Let that sink in for a moment. In a world that has historically viewed Black bodies as tools for labor, rather than vessels for life. Choosing to nurture your mind isn't just personal care, it's political rebellion. When we talk about mental health as a daily practice, we're talking about revolution. We're talking about persistence. We're talking about the audacity to believe that our minds deserve tending, even especially when the world suggests otherwise. Consider the findings from Equilibria Psychological Counseling Services during the pandemic. Over 60% of LGBTQIA plus youth reported depressive symptoms, with rates even higher among queer youth of color. These weren't isolated incidents or personal failings. They were the predictable outcome of overlapping systems of marginalization, racism colliding with homophobia, and transphobia, all amplified by the isolation of lockdowns. But here's what's powerful. When community organizations increase targeted outreach with culturally competent care, engagement improved dramatically. When people found providers who understood their lived experiences without requiring exhaustive explanations, healing became possible. Not because the external stressors disappeared, but because people found tools to navigate them, communities to support them, and validation that their experiences were real. This brings me to another critical insight from my conversation with Monique. Representation in mental health support isn't just nice to have, it's essential for actual healing to occur. Imagine walking into a therapist's office carrying the weight of racial battle fatigue, only to spend your session explaining what microaggressions are. Imagine trying to discuss the anxiety of being the only Black executive in your company with someone who thinks diversity is just a corporate buzzword. Imagine seeking help for the complex grief that comes with watching people who look like you die on social media, only to have that grief pathologized rather than contextualized. It's exhausting. And it's why many Black professionals simply don't seek help until they're at breaking point, if they seek help at all. But there are promising models emerging. In Canada, the federal government launched an initiative integrating over 100 Black mental health professionals into its employee assistance program network. The results: participation soared, satisfaction ratings improved dramatically. People reported feeling seen rather than sidelined. Why? Because when you don't have to translate your experience, you can actually focus on healing from it. When the person across from you already understands the context of your pain, you can move directly to addressing it rather than justifying its existence. As Maya Angelou wisely said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. When we find spaces where our stories can be told without footnotes or apologies, something shifts. The burden lightens, not because it disappears, but because it's finally acknowledged. This is why I believe so deeply in what Monique is doing. She's not just talking about mental health, she's transforming how we approach it, especially for Black women who are too often expected to be strong at the expense of being human. The strength of Black women has become both our crown and our cross. We're celebrated for our resilience while simultaneously being denied the very conditions that would make resilience unnecessary. We're expected to weather storms without complaint, to carry communities on our backs without buckling, to smile through pain that would break others. As Audre Lorde powerfully reminded us, caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. When Black women prioritize their mental health, they're not just helping themselves, they're challenging centuries of expectations that have demanded their sacrifice. So, what does this daily practice actually look like? It's different for everyone, but there are some common threads that Monique has identified through her work. First, it means regular check ins with yourself, not just when you're struggling, but especially when things seem fine. Ask yourself, how am I really doing? What's weighing on me that I haven't acknowledged? Where am I holding tension in my body. Second, it means building a support system that understands the unique challenges you face. This might include therapy with a culturally competent provider. It might mean joining professional networks specifically for Black women. It might mean cultivating friendships where you can be fully yourself without code switching. Third, it means recognizing the difference between what you can control and what you can't. You can't single handedly dismantle systemic racism. You can set boundaries around how much news you consume. You can't force your workplace to become instantly inclusive. You can document microaggressions and build alliances with colleagues committed to change. Fourth, it means celebrating your wins, no matter how small. In a world that often overlooks Black excellence, acknowledging your own achievements isn't vanity, it's necessity. And finally, it means extending grace to yourself on days when practicing mental health feels impossible, because there will be those days. Days when the weight feels too heavy, when the injustices seem too vast, when your reserves are depleted. On those days, remember what Monique shared. Sometimes the most powerful mental health practice is simply making it to tomorrow. I want to be clear about something. Advocating for daily mental health practices isn't about placing the burden of healing solely on individuals. Systems need to change. Workplaces need to become truly inclusive. Healthcare needs to address its biases. These are non negotiable. But while we fight for those changes, we also need strategies to preserve ourselves. As the African proverb reminds us, when the music changes, so does the dance. We can't wait for perfect conditions to begin caring for our minds. The research from NYU didn't just highlight problems, it pointed towards solutions. By expanding mental health interventions beyond individual trauma to include systemic factors, we create more effective pathways to healing. By acknowledging how racism and police violence impact developing brains, we can design better preventative approaches. This is the work that Monique Lundin is championing, work that recognizes both individual needs and collective responsibilities, work that honors the complexity of Black mental health without reducing it to either personal failings or systemic problems. It's both. It's always been both. So, I challenge you today, reject the notion that your mental health is a luxury to be addressed only in crisis. Claim it as your birthright. Defend it as your territory. Nurture it as your garden. Make caring for your mind part of your daily life. Schedule those check ins with yourself. Seek out culturally affirming resources. Advocate within your circles so everyone feels empowered, prioritizing their well being too, because your mental health isn't a luxury, it's your birthright. Your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. Your well being isn't optional, it's essential. And in a world that often suggests otherwise, claiming that birthright isn't just personal care, it's a revolutionary act that echoes far beyond your individual life. When you tend to your mental health daily, you're not just changing your own story, you're helping rewrite our collective narrative. As Monique so powerfully stated during our interview, when Black women heal, communities transform. When communities transform, systems change. When systems change, new worlds become possible. The revolution begins not in the streets, but in the quiet moments when you choose yourself, when you decide that your mind deserves the same care as your body, when you recognize that your mental health practice isn't selfish, it's sacred. I invite you to join this revolution, not tomorrow, not when things get better, not when you have more time, but today, right now, because the world needs you whole. The world needs you well. The world needs the unique gifts that only you can offer when you're not depleted from trying to survive. Your healing isn't just about you, it never was. It's about all of us. And it starts with the radical act of making your mental health a daily practice.